Welcome everyone to tonight's meeting of the Urban Planning Delegated Committee. Before we commence the meeting, I request that all mobile telephones are turned off or switched to silent. Thanks very much. My name is Councillor Westgold and I chair this committee. I will start by introducing my fellow councillors. Seated to my left in the chamber is Councillor Lisa Hollingsworth, Councillor Shima Abuki, Councillor Sophie Tournay, our Mayor, Councillor Felicity Sinfield. On the other side of the horseshoe table, we have Councillor Victor Franco, Councillor Rob Ballieu, Councillor John Friend Pereira, and Councillor Chris Pattis. I acknowledge the Manager, Governance Legal, Mr. Brian Wee, to my left, and the Director of Urban Living, Mr. Scott Walker, to my right. There are other officers in attendance tonight as well, and we will introduce them as they join us to present reports. The Urban Planning Delegated Committee is being live streamed on Council's YouTube channel to enable public viewing as we proceed. It's also being recorded and will be put up later as well on Council's YouTube. The primary purpose of this committee is to deal with issues under the Planning and Environment Act and the Building Act. This committee does have delegated authority to make decisions on behalf of Council. For those presenting this evening, and I think most of you know the process, I will call on you. First, the matter will be introduced by an officer who will give a report, and then I'll call upon you one by one to join us at the table. If you are making a submission, please present your viewpoint clearly and concisely on why you support or oppose the application. Please do not repeat what earlier speakers have said, and keep your points focused on relevant issues and points not previously raised. If you oppose the matter tonight, please tell the committee why you disagree and suggest alternatives that could be adopted to satisfy your concerns. Please focus on concerns rather than matters of history or details raised in the officer's report. There is a strict 3-minute limit for each speaker, including councillors. That can be extended, but we seldom do. At the 2.5-minute mark, we'll ring a bell to make it clear that there's only 30 seconds left to complete your presentation. For those in the gallery this evening, I would like to take this opportunity to ask you to show due courtesy and respect for each other, and as the committee as a whole, and refrain from any inappropriate behaviour. And just to finish, I would like to encourage all submitters, officers and councillors to speak directly into the microphone so we can all hear what's being said. I will now move to item number 1, apologies. Mr. Wee, do we have any apologies this evening?
Through you, Chair. This evening, Councillor Osborne-Smith and Councillor Nolan are apologies.
Thank you. Item 2 is confirmation of the minutes of the meeting of the 4th of August 2025 for this committee. I'm in search of a motion for someone to have us adopt these minutes. Councillor Sinfield.
So moved.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Hollingsworth.
Happy to second, thank you.
Is anyone opposed? There is no opposition. I'll ask you then for a show of hands. All of those in favour? Anyone against? There are none. I declare that motion carried. I now move to item number 3, declaration of conflict of interest of any councillor or council officers. Councillors or council officers, are there any conflicts of interest that you wish to foreshadow for matters on the agenda tonight? There are none, thank you. We can move right into the body of the report now. We have 2 items tonight. The first of those, number 4.1, is the Victorian Government's draft local heritage criteria and threshold guidelines, Council's submission in response to that draft. This will be presented tonight on behalf of the officers by Christian Williamson, Coordinator Strategic Planning.
Thank you, through you, Chair. The report in front of you tonight seeks retrospective endorsement of the submission lodged in response to the draft local heritage criteria and threshold guidelines prepared by the Department of Transport and Planning. The submission was lodged on the 1st of September, which was the due date that had been set by the Victorian Government. The thresholds or the draft guidelines adopt a similar approach to the Victorian Heritage Register criteria and threshold guidelines and are to be used by local government and by heritage consultants to determine whether a place meets the threshold for inclusion in the heritage overlay at the local level. Officers with input from a heritage consultant have reviewed the guidelines, and while there is general support for the guidelines to create a more consistent assessment framework for local heritage, have identified a number of points of concern within those guidelines and the way they're drafted at the moment. Those concerns include the lack of flexibility of some of the criteria in dealing with local variations, that some criteria and exclusion indicators set an artificially high and inappropriate threshold for inclusion, the lack of guidance on heritage precincts and serial listings, lack of definition of some of the key terminology and concepts that could undermine the intention to provide greater clarity and a consistent framework, the risk that the guidelines could be used to challenge existing heritage overlays, either through the planning permit process at VCAT or to seek removal of the heritage overlay from individual properties. And lastly, the guidelines establishing a pathway for regrading existing heritage places, which could potentially erode community trust and confidence in the planning system. The submission that is contained, I think, at attachment 2 also offers some recommendations on how to improve the guidelines to the department. Officers are seeking the support from the committee on this, and if that is offered tonight, then we will write to the Minister to confirm that that submission has been endorsed by the Urban Planning Delegated Committee. Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. We have 2 public submissions on this matter tonight. One against the recommendation put forward by the officers, and the other we're not sure, but we'll clarify that as we go through the presentation. I call upon first Mr. Bill Goodenough. If you could join us at the table, that'd be great. I'll just remind you, you've got
Is that right, I'm on?
Sorry, your mic's on. I'll just remind you, we've got 3 minutes for the
You can
presentation.
hear? You can hear?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Could you start with your name, even though we know it, and
Yeah,
the suburb in which you live?
Bill Goodenough, 718 Riversdale Road, Camberwell. My intention is to address the heritage issue of demolition by neglect. Christian Wilmson advised me an upcoming UPDC meeting on Council's new heritage strategy will be best placed to do that. But heritage matters are also on the agenda tonight. They interlink with the Council's upcoming new heritage strategy. So I'm taking opportunity to comment on a couple of the interlinking issues on tonight's agenda. Firstly, agenda item 4.1 says councillors focused on 6 criteria in Victorian Government's local heritage guidelines. The last 2, criteria 5 and 6, are noted by council officers as the most concerning of the 6 criteria. Number 5 is a risk that the guidelines will be used to challenge existing heritage overlays to gain support for demolition. Number 6 is the risk that the guidelines could erode community trust in the planning system. How ironically obvious, Mr. Chairman. I have written 26 foolscap pages accusing Burundara Council of 10 counts of ethical misconduct in the methods it used to classify my house contributory to a heritage overlay, which remains on the public record for any Burundara resident to read, because Council has not answered any of the questions raised in it. So it's obvious that Council faces the risks it describes as number 5 and 6, because it has created those risks by its own inaction. Council is portraying itself as a victim, whereas I have described it as a perpetrator to the Victorian Minister for Planning. Now, I was going to speak on item 4.2, but I'm told I have to come back, so I'll just keep going on a supplementary manner until the bell rings me out. I gave up trying to win my case against Boroondara Council because you can't beat somebody who doesn't turn up for the contest. The council simply ignored me, despite my family having occupied the same house in its community for 105 years. The council preferred to pretend my family never existed because somebody who doesn't exist doesn't have a problem. So I then turned my attention to offering my support to other members of the community
Mr. Goodenough.
who were saying
Excuse
they
me.
had been dudded by
Hello.
poor communications from the council
Hello.
in a similar way to my family had been dudded.
Mr. Goodenough, we've well and truly finished the 3 minute. We've had the 3 minutes for the presentation. It's all done. Thank you very much indeed. Just before you leave your seat, sir, could you resume your seat and see if there's any questions from councillors? Councillors, are there any questions of this presenter? Right. No, there aren't. Well, thank you very much. If you could... Councillor Hollingsworth. Sorry, Mr. Goodenough, there is a question. Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Goodenough, it is wonderful to see you and thank you for your presentation. Can I just ask one question? You mentioned that you've sent correspondence to Boroondara Council. Can you please confirm if you've ever received a reply to your correspondence? You mentioned you've sent correspondence to Council, and I know myself has been included in correspondence. And
You got a copy?
yes, and am I correct in saying you did receive a response?
Nothing.
You've never had a response?
Nothing. In
Okay.
5 years since I made that accusation, nobody from Boroondara Council has picked up a telephone
All right.
and said, hey, Bill, we are very pleased to know that your family has lived amongst us for 105 years.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank-
Goodenough.
thank
And we have given well-known community voluntary support. But
Thank you, Mr. Goodenough.
You've
if you could remain
answered the
respectful.
That's it.
question. Thank you.
Thank you.
that wasn't the end. I haven't finished the answer.
I think you've answered it. Thank you very much indeed for your answer. It was much respected. Are there any other councillor questions tonight? There are not. Thank you very much. If you could resume. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Friend Pereira.
Mr. Goodenough, thank you for your passionate interjection tonight. I just want to understand, are you in favour of the officer's recommendation on item 4.1 or not?
No.
No, and,
Look, I have accused Boroondara Council.
sorry, I just wanted a yes or no, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goodenough. Thank you, Mr. Goodenough. Now, are there any other councillors wishing to ask a question? There are not. Thank you very much. If you could just return to your seat, that'd be great. Thank you.
There you go, Victor. Good to see that.
I now call upon Emily McAndrew, if you could join us at the horseshoe table. Thank you very much. Yep, that's it.
Hey guys, good evening. I wrote unsure on the form, but I do agree with the criteria. So, your submission that the criteria is too rigid and sets thresholds that are too high and could be used to remove existing heritage protections, and I agree with that. I think that could be detrimental, but I do have a problem with the erosion that's already happening here in Boroondara. Our historic homes, especially in Hawthorn where I live, and surrounding suburbs are being demolished. And unfortunately, we are getting quite a few excuses that it's the state government's fault and you're just following them. But I think this council needs to lead by example, and if, you know, you see these things come through and, you know, start maybe protecting stuff a bit more. I did want to speak about the submission thing, where you could apply for something to be listed, but I don't think I'm allowed to. I think that needs to be a little bit more thought out and less dismissive. Sorry, I'm not allowed to say. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you, guys.
Okay, now, did I get you to tell us which suburb that you live in?
I'm in Hawthorne.
Sorry, I overlooked that. You did mention it in your presentation. Thank you very much indeed. Councillors, are there any questions of this speaker? There are none. Thank you very much for presenting tonight. I will now return to the officers for matters arising. Thanks very much.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. I don't think I have anything to add to my presentation earlier. Thank you.
Not even about responses to Mr. Goodenough?
I haven't taken, thank you, and through you, Chair, I haven't taken count of the number of correspondence that we've received from Mr. Goodenough, but I certainly know that responses have been provided because I know that I've drafted several of those myself.
Thank you, Mr. Williamson. Excuse me, Mr. Goodenough, could you remain in your seat and not address us from the gallery? Thank you. Excuse me, you've had your chance to speak tonight. Thank you very much indeed. You presented very well. I'm now in... Thank you. Thank you for your interjection. I'm now in search of a motion tonight. Questions? Sorry, my apologies. Have any of the councillors got any questions of our officers tonight? We have not. Oh, Councillor Friend Pereira.
Thank you, Chair. One of the areas that I'm trying to understand is what level of discretion would a heritage consultant have if these guidelines were to be adopted? In particular, say, changes that are made to the aesthetic of a building, where that might be an aesthetic change that is reversible. Have we a sense from these guidelines how a heritage consultant might approach those issues?
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Thank you for that question, Councillor from Pereira. The guidelines are intended to be a tool to assist heritage consultants to undertake the assessment. It's not a scientific, rigid calculation, so the heritage consultant still has an element of discretion, and in particular with regards to any alterations that might have been made to a building at the time of the assessment being undertaken. That's something that they will have to take into consideration to consider cumulatively and holistically as to whether those changes have impacted the heritage significance of the place to a point where that place might not meet the threshold anymore for local protection. So the guidelines, but that's no different to the situation that exists at the moment, where heritage consultants make those assessments on any place that has undergone alterations that they're taking out a detailed assessment for.
Councillor, does that provide the answer you were looking for?
It does, yes. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Franco.
Thanks, Chair. The argument that the guidelines make it easier to potentially regrade or degrade a heritage overlay, my question is going to be in relation to that point. What process is there now if a person is dissatisfied with a heritage overlay on their property or on their precinct? Is there a process for reconsidering a heritage overlay? Do they get reviewed at any time? And how do you think under the guidelines, because I couldn't see it as clearly as perhaps is argued in our submission, the ability to reconsider, but how might it vary under the government's guidelines?
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Thanks for the question. Okay, few things here to unpack and try to respond to. So I don't think the submission says that it'll make it easier to argue for regrading or grading changes. It just says that it potentially opens up an avenue for someone to use the guidelines and apply them in a way that they are not intended in the way that we think they should be used. So we see these as guidelines that are used when a place is assessed for heritage significance when there's no heritage overlay. Applying these guidelines to the regrading of an individual property in a precinct is problematic because the assessment is undertaken at the precinct level. So someone trying to use the guidelines to argue that the grading on their individual property is wrong is the concern that we have, and that should not be allowed to occur, either by someone applying for a planning scheme amendment to regrade their property, or if the government goes ahead and allows simple amendments to be made directly to the minister to potentially argue that my grading is wrong, and I'm showing this to you by assessing my place against the guidelines. And that is an avenue that we don't think these guidelines should provide or open up. That's the concern that's expressed in the submission. Does that answer your question, Councillor?
Yes, just one additional comment.
Yeah.
In the case of a standalone significant grading, that might be slightly different where the assessment is on an individual basis. Did you want to comment on that?
It's the same scenario. We don't think that these guidelines should be used to apply retrospectively. So they shouldn't be used to challenge existing heritage overlays. And we just saying in our submission that the guidelines need to be clear in stating that these guidelines are intended to be used for the assessment of places that are not in a heritage overlay already, to shut down that avenue of having people challenge existing heritage overlays by using the guidelines in a manner that they're not intended to be used.
And Chair, if I might, just one final point of clarification. I did ask it probably with an intention of being somewhat provocative or thought-provoking, but right now, if there is a heritage overlay, what is I assume the process is there is no process to reconsider. So they were the words I was expecting to hear. I don't know if you want to say that or not.
Yeah, I wasn't ignoring that. I was trying to close that line of questioning off first. So whether there is a process or not to reconsider, anyone can lodge an amendment request with council to challenge their grading or challenge their inclusion of their property. Like any other amendment that's made to council, that needs to be strategically justified. And in most instances, people can't justify that because it's all about, I want to demolish my house and build another house, or I want to do these extensions. So there is no grounds to challenge that on a heritage basis. Regradings are problematic depending on whether your property is a recently included property where there's a statement of significance that has been incorporated into the planning scheme. We're getting really technical here because the avenue to challenge that is again through a planning scheme amendment, because that is part of the planning scheme and can only be changed through a planning scheme amendment. If your property is an older property that, say, was included in the 1990s, where there's no incorporated document, we have a position at the moment that we will not consider those regradings because the regrading would require an assessment of the entire precinct, and therefore you would have to include, there's a requirement for a statement of significance to be included in the planning scheme as incorporated document. You would have to undertake a reassessment of the entire precinct, and that's not really justified for one property, and it opens up a whole range of challenges to the overlay in its entirety rather than just an individual site.
Thank you.
Chair, I might just add one additional element here, and that is that officers are mindful of a potential change to the Planning Environment Act. The Planning Environment Act is being reviewed, and that looks like it may be coming forward in the coming months. And there is potential in the change to the Planning Environment Act changing the way that an individual or property owner or developer can seek a planning scheme amendment, and that may avoid the need to come direct to council. So that would therefore, if there is an avenue to use the guidelines, open up potential avenues to amend the planning scheme without council necessarily having control over whether that can or should occur or not.
Councillor Franco, you happy with that? Thanks very much. Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Chair. If I may, Mr Walker, just on the comment you just made, would that then also remove third-party appeal, if that was to happen?
Again, through yourself, Chair, potentially, but that remains to be seen. The new Planning Environment Act, we don't know the detail of what's in that Act. It's yet to be brought forward. We probably won't know the detail until it becomes a bill introduced to Parliament. What we do know and do understand is that as part of the rewrite, there is a significant review of third-party processes. So what we've seen play out in terms of changes to the planning scheme and the way that certain planning applications are exempt from third-party processes, we suspect that will be consolidated in the Act itself and may apply to other types of applications, but also potentially to some types of planning scheme amendments as well.
Thank you. And if I may, I actually have a question for Mr Wilmsman. Thank you for putting this report together in such a short amount of time. I just want to open by saying that. The question I have is with regard to the proposed exclusion or exclusionary indicators, and if there is a perception that, if I may use an example, Mangara Road, is it? Yeah, Mangara in Canterbury, as the Shenry Croft property that sadly was subject to a very serious arson attack. And I know that Council is waiting to hear back from the Minister with regard to whether or not Section 6B, Special Controls Overlay, would be considered. What's your thoughts on potentially that type of situation where you've got a very significant, rare property that's subject to arson? Do you think that there may be even a less of an ability for council to try and have some influence over this?
Thank you, and through you. I don't necessarily think that in a scenario like you described in 7 Mangara, that the guidelines would have any much relevance at all. As you said, council responded to that demolition or illegal demolition through the request to the Minister for Planning under Section 6B of the Act, and an answer remains outstanding on that. And if we have a different scenario, then we might invoke that again and try that again in the future if we're successful and the government doesn't change anything. So I don't think that the guidelines will have any implications on that specifically.
Thank you, because I couldn't find anything in relevance directly to that, so I just wanted to get your opinion. Thank you.
Councillor Pattis.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I have two questions. The first one is a confirmation. We've already made this submission, so tonight it's about endorsing it. If we were to make or suggest changes, or we were to ask the officers to add things to the submission, how would that actually, what would be the impact of that? Could we go back to the government and say, you know, here are some additional stuff? I'm just interested in the impact of tonight.
Thank you, through you. In short, yes, we could. If there was something that councils agreed and felt was missing from the submission, then we could change that and then submit the updated version to the government to advise them that it was considered at tonight's meeting and some changes have been made, and here it is. given that the deadline was the 1st of September, it's been 14 days, so whether they'll still consider that, I don't know. That's a risk that I can't put a percentage on that.
Thank you. And I do understand why we did it this way in order to meet the deadlines. The second question I have through you, Chair, is that I think this is an excellent report from a technical point of view. So, you know, you've got experts writing to experts, and they're explaining quite complex concepts to each other. What I think happens, though, that when you get too technical, it becomes unemotional, and you miss an opportunity to actually have maybe greater impact. And I'll make a suggestion and ask you a question. So when we say, for example, it is possible that some places already included on the heritage overlay may not meet the threshold for significance if they were reassessed today using the guidelines framework. So that's a nice statement, and it's saying something that's important. But could we, for example, have not included, you know, the X number of properties, which, if these guidelines were successful, are under threat of, you know, the overlay removed? In other words, could we not have made our submission a lot more detailed and a lot more specific and a lot more, you know, to actually demonstrate a passion for this area and maybe get potentially a better outcome? I'm just wondering whether this is the right approach or whether we could become more specific.
Thank you, and through you. We wouldn't be in a position to answer that question or that example that you just said. There's 15,000 heritage properties in the municipality. I wouldn't be able to put a percentage figure on there, what a heritage consultant might decide today based on these guidelines. So that's an impossible answer for us to give, or an example to put an emotional spin on the submission. And we're technical experts. That's what we're engaged by council for to deliver, and that's the technical advice that we provide. So I get what you mean in terms of, you know, hitting an emotional strain, but in this instance, I don't think that that's something that was possible.
Could I ask it, maybe, Chair, your indulgence, to ask it to the Director in a different way? Do we have a track record of being successful in using this approach, which is a highly technical and highly general approach, rather than being specific and making some estimates about the likely number of properties that are going to be in danger of having their heritage affected, and to actually come up with a document that has a little bit more colour to it, but can actually maybe be a little bit more specific?
Again, through yourself, Chair, I'm happy to answer that, and it's pretty consistent with the answer that's just been given. We are here to provide a technical and detailed, informative, constructive response to the draft guidelines, and that's what it is that we've put together. We have a great deal of success in providing input to some of these sorts of documents of this nature. There are other consultations and other material that often is presented to council and the community that we don't have a great deal of success on, and sometimes those will have, and often do have, an element of emotion to them and detail to them in a different vein as well. So it's not a simple answer to say yes, we have success, and no, we don't have success. But at the end of the day, officers will take a professional, constructive and considered approach to inputting to these sorts of draft documents that are put forward.
Thank you. That seems to have exhausted questions for councillors. Thank you very much. We're now in a position to seek a motion if someone's prepared to move one. Councillor Rabuki.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, happy to move the motion on the screen. Thank you.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Sinfield.
Happy to second.
Is anyone opposed? There is no opposition. Councillor Rabuki, would you like to speak to your motion now? Thanks very much.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Chair. I'm very pleased to move this motion tonight. And first, I want to acknowledge the work of our officers. in undertaking that they have undertaken in preparing Burundara's submission to the Victorian Government's draft local heritage criteria. As usual, their attention to detail and advocacy on behalf of our community have ensured that the voice of Burundara is well represented in these important state-level submissions. Heritage is not an abstract concept for us, it's something woven into the very fabric of Burundara. Our heritage buildings and precincts tell the story of who we are, from Victorian and Edwardian homes to our historic shopping strips, to the churches, schools and public buildings that have shaped our suburbs. These places are part of our identity. And as many in this chamber know, within the current context of planning changes, the fight to preserve heritage is not an easy one. Our community has stood alongside this council to advocate for the protection of buildings at risk, and many of these community members are here with us tonight. Those campaigns have been passionate, often hard fought, and they reflect the deep pride our residents have in the unique character of their neighbourhoods. Together, the work of officers on the draft criteria, their advocacy of the guidelines to be applied for the purpose of preserving heritage buildings, and as Mr Wilhelm has pointed out, not being applied retrospectively, along with Council's own processes, including the agenda item following at 4.2, our community heritage nomination process. These actions strengthen Burundara's role as one of Melbourne's most committed municipalities for heritage protection. And for these reasons, I'm happy to move this motion tonight and commend it to my fellow councillors. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rabuki. Councillor Sinfield, this is unopposed. Do you wish to add to that at all?
No, thank you.
Much. I will now put the motion to a vote. All of those in favour? Is anyone against? 2 hands still up, down, terrific. None. I declare the motion carried. Thank you very much indeed. We'll now move to item 4.2, Community Heritage Nomination Process. And this is a report, a review on the past couple of years on the operation of this process. Again tonight, Kristen Williamson will present the officer's report.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. This report presents the Urban Planning Delegated Committee with the outcomes of the 2-year review of the Community Heritage Nomination process. In adopting the process in May 2023, the UPDC resolved to undertake a 12-month and a 24-month review. The 12-month review was reported in August last year. Since the launch of the nomination process in August 2023, 47 properties have been nominated through valid submissions, and 10 of those places have been referred to heritage consultants for consideration and assessment, with 7 ultimately recommended for inclusion in the heritage overlay. Overall, the review has found that the process is broadly functioning well and consistently meets its intended objective of protecting places of heritage significance that were not picked up in previous heritage studies. However, there are some refinements that can be made to the process, and those are set out in the report, and just broadly, they relate to clarifying the definition of new information that is required in order for a nomination to be progressed, clarifying the terminology for initial review and heritage assessment, and amending the notification process so that property owners are notified once officers determine that a nomination needs further assessment by a heritage consultant. And there are also some minor recommendations with regards to updating the council website for the nomination process. Also wanted to just note that in the actual review report, which is at page 62 of the agenda, there is just an error in one of the, in the last paragraph on that page, under the table with the location of the nominated places. It says at the ward level, Junction received the most nominations, closely followed by Mailing and Riversdale. That should actually say at the ward level, Mailing received the most nominations. So officers will just correct that in the final version if the report is endorsed tonight. That'll go on to Council's public website. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Before we do that, we have 3 public submissions tonight. So again, I'll call you forward one by one to come forward and address us. I call upon first Mr. Bill Goodenough. Mr. Goodenough, before you commence, if I could just ask you to, thank you very much for your submissions, but I know you're very emotive about a number of topics, but if you could be quite respectful for the officers, that would be appreciated. So if I can get you to start again with your name for the purposes of the recording, your name and the suburb in which you live.
Good enough. 718 Riversdale Road, Camberwell.
Thank you.
Now, I'm commenting on agenda item 4.2, review of the CHNP. Council mentions a key issue identified as perceived bias and says council faced public criticism regarding alleged bias in the CHNP process. These claims were unfounded and inaccurate, which raises the question, is my accusation of ethical misconduct by Burundara Council unfounded and inaccurate? Despite members of my family having lived in the subject house for 105 years, on 8th of November 2017, then Victorian Minister for Planning, Richard Wynne, now replaced by Sonia Kilkenny.
Mr. Goodenough, you really need to address item 4.2, which is to do with the report on the community heritage nomination process.
I'm addressing 4.2, okay? Now, now replaced by Sonia Kilkenny,
Mr.
said
Goodenough, I
that
don't
heritage decisions made by councils would be supported by state government if the councils observed a necessity for the need for heritage protection to be balanced with a requirement to afford natural justice to the landowners of affected properties.
Mr. Goodenough.
My 26 pages
excuse me,
accusation against...
Mr. Goodenough, Mr. Goodenough. Mr. Goodenough, you are on silent now. Thank you. Now, thank you, Mr. Goodenough. Can you terminate now? Your matter doesn't relate to point 4.2. Your presentation on this item does not relate to this item, so I won't extend to questions. If you could resume your seat in the... If you could resume your seat in the gallery, please. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Goodenough. If you could resume your seat in the gallery, it'd be appreciated. Thank you very much. I now call upon Christina Brannigan to join us at the table. Thanks very much. Ms. Brannigan, as usual, if you could start with your name and the suburb in which you live. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name is Christina Brannigan. I live in Camberwell, and I'm also a member of the Burundara Heritage Group, so speaking with both hats. So I do support the item, the recommendation, and I would like to really thank everyone who's been involved, the officers in particular, Mr. Wilmson, Marie Sharif and Emile Dixon for all the work they've undertaken, and previous officers before them, and also councillors who were involved in getting the program together, and people in the community. I remember there were a number of big meetings we had to get it off the ground, so I thank Councillor Hollingsworth and you, Felicity, for all your efforts. So it's great to be here today. I just wanted to talk very briefly really about why we still need the program, our thoughts on that. So just wanting to show a few slides. The first one here, these are examples of places that have been successfully identified by people in the community in the last 3 to 4 years that otherwise would not have been protected. So just really trying to, I guess, reiterate perhaps for some of the newer councillors that we really do need this program. So these are some lovely places in Hawthorne East, in Councillor Sinfield's ward that are now actually protected as a consequence of community. If I could have the next slide, please. I guess the question is here, you know, what we're trying to show here is that we're still losing a lot of properties. All of those places have been demolished in the last 3 or 4 years, very sadly. Council tried and community tried to protect many of them, but they were all nominated at some level by people in the community, and sadly we've lost them. And they're really just the tip of the iceberg. We just put together a few, but you know, we could show you many, many more, and I'm sure there are many, probably hundreds that the Heritage Group isn't aware of. So it's still an issue. And the next slide, please. These are other places that have been nominated since 21-22. They are all places, some of them are actually protected. Councillor Franco will be very familiar with one of them. They're all protected, sorry, the one on the bottom left isn't quite protected yet, but they've all been nominated by people in the community. The one, the bottom in the middle is actually a very early Robin Boyd house in Balwyn North that definitely would have been demolished, as would a number of the other properties had they not been nominated by the community. Next slide, please, nearly done. Here we just got some examples of a few more. The top left is Currajong in Auburn Road that was saved at the last minute from the wreckers, and the other properties on the bottom left are in Wattle Road that we're still waiting to hear from the Planning Minister about. These were all community nominations, and the one on the bottom right. Top right is a property in Rosebery Street where we're hoping that council might be able to find the appetite to help to challenge a recent decision by the planning department. I think that might be my final slide, is it? Yes, thank you. So I just really wanted to reiterate that there really is a need for this program, and we think it's working very well. So we thank the officers and the councillors.
Thank you, Ms. Brannigan. Councillors, are there any questions of this presenter tonight? There are none. Thank you very much indeed. I now call upon Nerida Muirden to join us at the table. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Nerida Muirden and I live in Camberwell. Hello, councillors and officers. Thanks for the opportunity to speak tonight. I support the officers' recommendation and thank you very much for all the work done so far. In the past, the community did not really know how to nominate or if they could nominate. The community nomination program is a good process and I have a good example of why we need to keep it. Up on the screen there you can see a picture of two men, Mr Fritz, Mr Holzer, who started the Fritz Holzer Brickworks, also known as the Hawthorne Brickworks, and that's what I'm going to talk about as the example tonight. In 2021, I was personally involved with a group of residents on Rosebery Street, Hawthorne East, who nominated about 40 workers' cottages dating from the 1880s. They formed a group, the Friends of Rosebery Street. They did their own research, including title searches, and found workers who worked at the Fritz Holzer Brickworks, and also that John Holzer and Augustus Fritz owned houses on the street that they rented out to their workers. The residents also engaged heritage expert Nigel Lewis to look into Rosebery Street and funded his report about the heritage value and importance of the street in relation to the Fritz Holzer brickworks, now known as the Fritz Holzer Park. Mr. Lewis said, the Fritz Holzer Park is significant for the Fritz Holzer clay pit landform, one of the largest serving in Melbourne, and the bluestone drain behind Rosebery Street houses. He also said, the late 1880s period was very important for Fritz Holzer when they produced a range of coloured bricks with a distinctive hawthorn black as their key product. These bricks form the basis of most of the polychrome brickwork that was widely used in the 1880s and helped define the building boom of marvellous Melbourne. I'd also like to acknowledge the Hawthorn Historical Society, who are here tonight, who have been enormously helpful. And the picture up on the screen now is supplied by the Historical Society, and it is actually the great-grandfather of one of their members. And that is actually the clay pits back in the 1920s, I believe. Anyway, this is a great example of Hawthorn's history and an important place. It would never have come to light if the residents hadn't found the link between the street and the brickworks and engaged Mr. Lewis. It was a difficult time for the residents, and it would have been a lot easier for them at the time if a process was in place to nominate. It created a lot of extra work for them and also for council. As a consequence, council commissioned their own heritage report, which found the street met the strict heritage criteria, then applied to the DTP for heritage protection. That was over 2 years ago. Despite the recent DTP decision, we hope council will continue to fight for the protection of the workers' cottages. It's crucial to continue to review our city for heritage grade places that for some reason have not been protected because they were missed during the gap studies or the heritage significance of a place has increased with new information. It's important that we as a city protect our well-designed heritage neighbourhoods. They are becoming increasingly rarer across Burundara and many
Ms.
in the
Mirren,
community.
could you wrap up fairly
Yep.
soon? Thank you very much.
Just finishing up this sentence. And now in the future, we'll be glad that the council had the foresight to protect these great examples of urban design and architecture. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Councillors, Councillor Hollingsworth has a question.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Newton, for your presentation. And I do have a question, but I first of all just want to say, every time you speak, you bring something new to me that I wasn't aware of. And you talked about the hawthorn brick and the black. Do you know what compound was used to actually put the black into the brick?
I'm sorry, I don't have that information.
A question for next
time. But I'm sure
time.
it could be found, so yeah.
If anyone can find it, you can. Thank you very much.
Okay, and
Thank
also
you.
just that photo up there is one of the houses on the street. I forgot to add that, so, yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There doesn't appear to be any further questions. Thank you very much for your presentation,
Thank
Shah.
you for your time.
Thank you. I will now return to the officers for matters arising, if there are any.
Thank you. Through you, no further matters to discuss. Just want to thank the community for their supporting voices tonight and throughout. Thank you.
Do any of the councillors have questions of the officers? There are none. Thank you very much. I will now move to seek a motion from the floor. Councillor Sinfield.
Thank you. I'd be delighted to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you. I debated with Councillor Bookie, but she's allowed me the honour to second. Thank you.
And do we have any opposition in the chamber tonight to this motion? We don't. So, Councillor Sinfield, if you'd like to say a few words.
Thank you, I would. Our heritage is a part of who we are. It's what we inherit, what we appreciate today, and what we think is important to protect and pass on to future generations. Additionally, Council has a statutory responsibility to identify and protect places of heritage significance. And before the introduction of the CHNP, places nominated by the community for heritage protection were progressed in an inefficient, inconsistent, and ad hoc manner. There was no consistent process to determine which nominations should proceed, which should be declined, or when to engage a heritage consultant. Not only was it frustrating and inefficient for the council officers, it was frustrating our community members who received inconsistent advice and responses. The need for a clearer, more structured approach to manage new nominations became apparent, particularly in areas that had been comprehensively considered through the previous heritage studies. In response, as we know, Council has developed and subsequently adopted the CHNP in May 2023, and it's provided a streamlined and much more transparent process. We've had new officers appointed to assist in the administration of this process, and I think over the last 2 years, we've had the benefit of reflecting on the process and how it can be improved. I'd like to thank Mr. Walker, Marie, Christian, and the whole team for their dedication to this project. It's evolved and matured over time and is now embedded in a business as usual approach. As with all council practices, policies and procedures though, it will continue to evolve, particularly with the changes foreshadowed to the Planning Environment Act, the Victorian Government Local Heritage Criteria and Threshold Guidelines, as we heard earlier, and our very own Burundara Heritage Strategy. And should the need arise, this too will be continuously reviewed. I commend the motion and the CHNP to my colleagues.
Thank you. As it is unopposed, Councillor Hollingsworth, do you want to add a few words or not?
If I may, very briefly, thank you. I just wanted to comment on the two presenters this evening and thank them for bringing to our attention the importance of not just the heritage significant homes, whether they're standalone or in precincts, but this very presentation this evening on Fritz Holzer reminds us that our early occupiers of Burundara were often people of modest means who lived in modest cottages and worked very, very hard to preserve those cottages and those precincts, and the majority of these homes are still standing there today. And that's the important element of our heritage. It doesn't matter to the extent of the financial value or the materials used in it. It's the fact that it's quintessentially the essence of Burundara's origin. So I just wanted to thank the presenters again and thank Councillor Sinfield for her comments and thank all the officers for their many, many years and all of our councillors here for their involvement in working to develop this very important document. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth. I shall now put the motion. Those in favour? Is anyone against? There is no one. I declare this motion carried. I'll just move to the final items on the agenda tonight. Item 5, general business. Councillors, are there any items of general business? There are none. Urgent business? There are none. Confidential business? There are none. Thank you. Before I close the meeting, I want to thank all of you who have joined us this evening. I declare the Urban Planning Delegated Committee meeting now closed. Thank you.